Hello everybody, this is Mong004 and welcome back to my channel, and today we will be talking about my playtime with Warframe The New War. Now again, this is all my subjective opinion, so if you disagree with me, no problem, I don't mind that, but I had my own experience with Warframe The New War and Warframe beforehand, and I'm mostly new at Warframe. I wouldn't consider myself a deeply seasoned player, but I'm seasoned enough that I got through a lot of the quests leading up to the New War, so all those things I had already done prior to the New War. Not to mention I ended up grinding for my Necromech and ended up grinding for my Railjack. So all those things I had already done. So I might not be all that seasoned at it, but I do know enough about Warframe and the story and the gameplay structure. Again, this is just talking about my experience with the New War and what I thought about it. But before I get into that, let's just go into some of my history with Warframe so that we can understand a little bit of a perspective of, how I got to the New War. I started playing Warframe back in 2013 at the beginning of the PS4's life cycle. I saw the trailers for it, the whole ninjas play free trailers. And I was like, you know what? Let me check this game out. It actually looks kind of cool. Like, ninjas play free, which I don't know. I never thought it was much about ninjas. I mean, maybe they had some ninja moves, but I don't know. It didn't look like ninjas to me. It looked like, kind of space samurai or, some type of advanced, martial arts space, I don't know, technologically advanced fighter. I don't know. It just didn't remind me of ninjas as much, Well, maybe there's not much of a difference between samurai and ninja, but I don't know. I just didn't think ninja when I saw it. They just looked more like a bit of a samurai, but technologically advanced or something like that. So, correct me if I'm wrong if you have to. So I downloaded it and I started playing it. And I played it for probably, maybe 2.5 hours? I think it was about 2.5 hours. And I really liked the gameplay. Like, the gameplay was fun. The gameplay was actually quite enjoyable and all that type of stuff. Like, you could move kind of fast. I don't think they had bullet jumping back then, but you could move kind of fast. And I liked the shooting and all that type of stuff. And even the beginning sequence was kind of neat, breaking out of that place where the Grineer have found you right after you waking up and they're trying to take you for themselves. And they pretty much have come in this squad led by this character named Vor, who again is leading this whole thing, and he latches this thing onto your ankle and stuff. And eventually you have to fight him in like this little mini boss fight for a little while, but he eventually gets away, which you ultimately meet up with him again in another story mission called Vor's Prize, and you have to do another boss battle with him. But in that one, you kill him, but you kind of kill him somewhat. That whole beginning sequence I thought was like really neat and really sets up like the tone of what kind of world Warframe is. And it's just a minimal part, but starts to get you ready for the world that is built here. Oh, and right here, I choose the bow. I don't know. I like the bow. The bow's fun. And yeah, it was all right. It felt good. It felt neat. And you had some tricks you can do with your Warframe and all that stuff. And it just teaches you how to, learn about the weapons and learn about some of the things you can do with your Warframe to prepare you for like the rest of the game. Beyond the gameplay that I was playing there, that was kind of fun with the shooting and stuff. I don't know. It first felt kind of bland. Not to mention, there was never much that the game explained to you when it came to its mechanics, especially back then, because you didn't have your aircraft, and I don't remember there being like orders or something like that. So you were pretty much lost and left to discover the game yourself. I mean, I'm not saying I'm all about hand-holding, but man, the game kind of needed to hold your hand just a little bit more. And also, it didn't have a lot of like the cinematic quests and all that type of stuff. And it didn't have a good sense of direction for the player. I mean, it was very basic. And even now I would complain about some of its almost inability to explain things. They have made it better over time, and versus back then and now, yeah, right now it's much, way better than it was back then. But just something about the gameplay seemed a little bit too bland and way too cumbersome and way too complicated. So after about 2.5 hours with it, I stopped playing it, and then I eventually just completely deleted it off my PS4's hard drive. I would eventually return to Warframe in the beginning of 2021 after buying a gaming PC. You see, after buying a gaming PC, I don't know, for some reason, I was very interested in trying games that I wouldn't normally care about. And Warframe was one of those games that I wanted to try. And plus, I remembered trying it out many years before. And I was like, oh, I remember liking the gameplay, but I didn't really remember really liking it all that much. But I said, let me try it again. And it was mainly because of the fact that I liked the gameplay. Plus, I had heard about all of the updates the game had. Like, I heard about the fact that they had these new open world areas and these big fields to go on, and that it had all these different missions and these places like Orb Vallis, which was like this snowy like place. I mean, it's not snowing anymore, after the whole New War thing, but it was this big open snow place. It was a big, wide open place. And the first place was like the Plains of Eidolon, which was this big green like place with all these hills, and you had to fight enemies in all these places and stuff like that. But it was just a bigger open place. And eventually down the line, there was Deimos and that open world, like the Necrolist and all that stuff. But it was really neat, very neat. Cinematic quests and a deeper story and more characters. So I was like, yeah, okay. Yeah, maybe I can try to get back into Warframe and, see what I've actually been missing. After installing the game and booting it up, I immediately became familiar with the game, and this time I wasn't playing with like a controller on the PS4, I was playing with keyboard and mouse, and I liked it because my whole discovery of like keyboard and mouse just made, gaming more fun. It made it kind of novel again because it was just a new way to experience games. Not a whole lot different, but it was new for me, So I'm playing through the game and stuff like that, and I'm starting to realize, okay, I'm starting to get this system, not to mention the game explained itself a lot better, and I was liking where it was going. I was liking the gameplay again. I was liking the way that I was actually progressing in the game, and even the stories. Like, it just all seemed really neat, and I realized, man, all these years I haven't played it, I missed out on a whole lot. And I just started delving deeper into the game, upgrading my Warframe, getting all the different, different weapons and all the different equipment, like getting my Archwing and some of like the mining equipment and even like the scan encoder and all that good stuff, going throughout the missions and just finding out more about the story and seeing what had been built in all those years. And yeah, I realized Warframe was just a deep game, like with so many different mechanics, sometimes a seriously overwhelming amount of mechanics and stuff. Mechanics that eventually become fun to use and actually help with the world building too. But it was a really, really neat game with a whole lot of mechanics. I can sit up there and talk about the pros and cons of Warframe. Its deep mechanics, even to this day, I would have to say, are just not well explained. Like, there's a lot of things you have to search for, but once you find out how to do something, it immediately opens up just a new avenue of fun. And considering the fact that I would even still to this day consider myself mostly new to Warframe, there's still some aspects of it that are still novel to me, like the necromechs and the railjacks. And I'm aware there are people who don't like the Archwing, the railjack and the necromech and stuff like that, but I actually like that stuff. I just think it adds so much diversity and variety to the gameplay. So, to each their own. But still, and all the different missions is neat. I mean, it can get kind of repetitive, that all games can, but I liked it and I still kind of enjoy Warframe. And of course, getting back into it, I played around with it for about a month, and then I left it alone again for another 6 months, which, to clarify, I actually now forgot about it because I forgot when I actually did the necromech and all that stuff, but I actually did the necromech, the Archwing, and the railjack when I got back into Warframe months later. I didn't do it for that first month that I got back into it. I was mainly just doing a bunch of missions, collecting things, and I don't know, just getting a lot of materials and just enjoying the gameplay. And I think I did a few of the cinematic missions at that time. So yeah, now that I remember it, I don't want to confuse that. Now that I remember it, yes, I actually did all of the major story and stuff like that much later on, months later when I got back into it. Then in the summer of 2021, I decided to watch the TennoCon presentation that they had. I think they had it like at the end of July, and saw them talking about this whole thing called The New War. And I was like, you know what, maybe I need to get back into Warframe and really start getting through all of these cinematic missions, because I did some of the cinematic stuff in the beginning, but not all of it, just very little. So after seeing the whole trailer for The New War and seeing them talk about it and seeing how supposedly expansive this was going to be, I started taking Warframe a little bit more serious and really getting back into playing with it. And I played all the way through a lot of the cinematic missions, all the way through to the Old War and the War Within, and those last few missions before you can actually do The New War. Now, even going through all those missions, right? The one thing I can definitely say is that Digital Extremes is really good at their writing. I mean, when it comes to the characters and the reasoning for a lot of things, and it's incredibly deep. I mean, top tier, ahead of their class. I mean, I would even go as far as to say that there's probably some of the best writers in the gaming industry. Like the Warframe story is just incredibly deep and incredibly engrossing. So yeah, I would probably say they are really some of the best writers in the gaming industry, probably even in some of the entertainment industry, at least in my opinion. That's my subjective opinion, but that's just my opinion. And this is not at all to say that they have no flaws. I mean, they clearly do have flaws. All writing has flaws, but I think they're pretty darn good at what they do. Very darn good. And I do think that they are some of the best writers out there. I mean, I liked playing Destiny, and Destiny was all right. But one of my things with Destiny is that, and maybe it's just me, but I always felt that the more I played Destiny, the more I got into the story, the more convoluted it got. It could just be me because I just wasn't as interested in the Destiny story. Whereas when it came to Warframe, I don't know, I found myself more invested in the story. It just might be a me thing. But the further I went into it, the more I liked the story. And I think that DE is really great at writing stories. However, my biggest problem with a lot of these quests and the story is that for the type of story that they're trying to tell in a lot of these quests seem awfully short. I mean, like really short. I mean, if you look at quests like Chains of Horror, The War Within, The Second Dream, The Sacrifice, you can do all those missions. And if you do all those missions, you could probably do all those missions in like 2.5 hours. I mean, when you consider the story and what those quests, I'm saying missions, but what those quests are trying to tell you, you would figure that would be like 12 to, 16 hours. Maybe I'm just asking for too much, but 12 to 16 hours worth of gameplay, but you can do it all in about 2.5 hours. That's quite a bit of story that is kind of thrown at you just really quick, just really fast. I mean, it's thrown at you so quick and with so little gameplay to go along with it. You consider the amount of progress that's made in those stories in terms of what those quests are trying to tell you about the Warframe universe and all that stuff, and along with all the depth that goes along with it. It's an awful lot. I mean, I remember doing The Second Dream, right? This is ultimately where you find out about yourself being a Tenno and you're this, teenage kid who's the star child, and you wake up out of this dream and you're finding out, oh, I was controlling the Warframes in this dream and I've been asleep for a while and all that stuff. I mean, you consider the level of disorientation that you would get after waking up and realizing all this stuff about yourself. If a normal person woke up from something like that, they'd be like very disoriented. And this would be regardless of, whatever they knew before. You'd have to be, gain a sense of orientation about the environment and what's going on, that you figured there should have been much more to that entire quest, like maybe more side missions or much more things you have to do before you end up facing the queens. No, you wake up and you get knocked out of your Warframe, and then all of a sudden you're, standing there facing the queens directly. And it's just, I don't know, there's so many things happen so fast in that quest that it's like, why does all this happen that darn quick? Like, take your time, like, let this all happen slowly. Like, all these things unfold so quick. I was watching a live stream where Rebecca Ford was actually doing some gameplay where she just wanted to get caught up on the other, cinematic quests before the New War. And, everybody could watch the live stream so they can get caught up on it too. And one of the things that she said, I think best explains the feeling of kind of going through these quests in Warframe. And remember, this is subjective because this is the way I felt going through these quests in Warframe. And she was talking about how fast things escalate in a lot of these Warframe quests. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like, things escalate and de-escalate so fast that it almost feels, unrealistic, or almost, I mean, I know it's not supposed to be realistic, but, for fiction, it almost seems unrelatable or narratively claustrophobic. That's just what I'm calling it right now. And that's kind of the same way I felt about the New War. Now, again, I like the New War, and even when it comes to the old quests, like, I like those quests. I like the gameplay that's in it, but they are awfully short. And that's the same thing with the New War. The New War actually tells a pretty good story. For the most part, I do question some of the characters and some of their decisions, or at least some of their place in the story, but it tells a really good story. However, I think it ends too darn quick. I mean, you could say, okay, well, 4 hours, because I did it in about 4 hours. 4 hours is the longest quest that DE has ever done for any of their quests. And it really is. That doesn't particularly mean it's as long as it should be, at least not in my opinion. Like, that quest should have been much longer for what it's trying to tell you. So let's get into talking about the New War directly and all of the different story bits and all that stuff. And for anybody who hasn't played the New War, clearly there will be spoilers because I want to be going through several things in the mission. So let's get started. The quest starts off in this purple haze where you see Ballas kind of sitting and standing next to himself, seeing a former version of himself with the new transformed, almost sentient version of himself standing behind him. And then the same thing happens to the Lotus. You see the sentient version of her standing behind the more Lotus version of her. And it's just kind of just letting you know some of the history of the story at this point when it comes to these two main characters, Ballas and the Lotus. Then, of course, you get the vision of your Tenno. This is my Tenno right here. I mean, doesn't he look cool? Doesn't he look cool? So it's pretty much bringing back the main three characters in this, your Tenno, the Lotus, and Ballas, and just kind of reminding you some of the things that happen. Then there's a visual descent onto Cetus, where all these children are playing around. They're playing around with their little toys, and the one kid has a mask on, takes it off, and looks up at the sky, and he sees the sentient ship just crashing through the big tower right over Cetus, and it's just obviously the sign of the sentience. They're about to tear some freaking crap up and all this stuff. Eris, the main baddie, well, presumably the main baddie, walks up to the kid and he's looking at the kid and the kid's kind of afraid. So he's kind of like out of fear. The kid slowly tries to put his mask back on, but Eris takes it off, in a, seemingly kind way and says to the kid with his beaming red eyes, "Don't be afraid." And, this is just a sign of showcasing that Eris is a very intimidating person, very intimidating. This is when we begin the Grenier mission. After being shot out of the sky, many of the passengers on a ship that was shooting at this Eidolon out in the plains of Eidolon, are all mostly killed except for one of the passengers, and that is Call 175, who's actually injured, but he's able to stand back up and actually get going in the midst of like a flamey field. Like, this is a real sign that the war is on. You're eventually told to meet at a beacon by your commander, but once you head towards the beacon, there's this big crash where this other, aircraft goes down. And this is when Call says he needs to go and help the pilot, which is in another place on the battlefield. I don't know why, but he's in another place on the battlefield. So then you have to run towards that pilot while running through a fiery field and fighting all of these sentients on your way to this other base and the other pilot. Now, Call eventually makes his way over to the other down craft and ends up finding out that the pilot there is dead. At this point, he's not going to give up because he actually wants to fight. And he ends up coming up with this idea of actually using an explosive to blow up the Eidolon on the field. So he goes for another base further down this fiery combative lane. And this is where I really like Call. Call is like a really neat character. It's really messed up that this was such a short mission, but I understand why it was short. After sneaking his way past all these Eidolons who are shining these lights down and, he has to try his best not to get caught by them, he eventually finds the explosive and makes his way to the Condrix Eidolon to make a desperate attempt to blow it up. Not to mention on your way there, you get this real cool shotgun-like gun, which is cool as all crap, but I just got to keep this thing moving. After making his way there, he eventually sits down, pulls out the explosive, and attempts to sacrifice his life, at first for the queens, but then he says, "For my brothers," and all that stuff. But he's then stopped as the explosive does not go off. And what do you know, it's our good old buddy Era who comes and tells him those famous words, "Don't be afraid." Yeah, thank you, Era. You're a wonderful person with a wonderful sense of humor. Then comes the mission with the Corpus character, Viso. Now, I like Viso as a character. I would have to say this mission I wasn't necessarily all that fond of. Just the gameplay. It was just like very slow paced and it was kind of boring, which I kind of get it because Viso, he's just simply a technician. He's not a military person and he's walking around with, I think, the Origin Systems weakest pistol. I mean, at least one of the weakest pistols in the game and stuff like that. But it does add to the story because as Viso's making his way through this Corpus ship, the ship is under attack, the place is falling apart, and he's being commanded by Alad V, who's pretty much telling him the entire time while pronouncing his name the wrong way. Like, it's funny, and he even has to correct him at different times. But he's telling them the entire time how to make his way throughout the ship, and Viso has to use these robots to make his way through because, this weak pistol can only do but so much. So these robots aid him through. All 3 robots have different tactical tasks. One robot, like you can see here, acts as an explosive, which can also be used in combat to take out enemies, as you can see there, and can also be used to hack terminals to get past doorways and many other things. And then there's the shield robot, which is pretty much this drone that can shield you and even the explosive robot. So with that, it'll help you to actually get past enemies that are shooting at you while keeping you shielded. Then there's the striker mower, which is pretty much the assault robot, which will actually help you to assault enemies while you're making your way through, giving you at least another form of firing at all these things while they're firing at you. So you pretty much use these robots as you're going throughout the ship, and there's pretty much your utility, assault, and defense, and all that type of stuff to survive your way throughout. Because again, Viso's not a military person, so these things just help him out, including in a boss fight that's very familiar to a boss fight that you fight in the main Warframe game. But it all comes together pretty well, and although this mission's kind of boring, it does kind of add to the story. And again, like I said, I like Viso as a character, especially with what he does at the end. Viso eventually makes his way to the command room of the ship, and there he's pretty much hacking the ship to gain control over it again and gain control over the fleet. However, Alad V starts to punk out, and he eventually surrenders to the sentients and starts talking about they're the new management, and Viso's like, no, I ain't having that. So Viso goes full boss and decides to fire on the sentient ship, in which he engages the ship's forward weapons, fires at the ship. Ultimately, the sentient ship fires back at the ship that Viso's shooting from, destroying the entire ship and killing Viso with it. And thus, Viso ends up sacrificing his own life for the betterment of the Origin system, which I have to say, even though I might not have really liked this mission, I was like, no. Viso was the boss, man, to actually give up his life for more than just himself. Absolutely cool, man. So that's why I really liked Viso. As you saw, immediately after that, you show up with your railjack along with other Grineer ships and other Corpus ships, and you're doing battle with the mothership of the Sentients. You pretty much have to mow and plow your way through all the smaller sentient ships, just knocking them down, taking them out, and thankfully, you actually have some practice with a railjack, which I actually understand why they actually required that you needed to own a railjack before this, because using a railjack is a little complicated. It's not too complicated to learn or anything like that, but it does take some practice and some understanding to use. So I do get why they wanted you to actually own a railjack before this. And I actually owned my railjack and actually had some decent mods for it. So doing this without a railjack that's modded up at least half decently, it doesn't have to be perfect, is a lot harder and stuff like that. At least what I heard from other people, but I actually had a pretty decent time with this and it wasn't too bad. Ultimately, you end up mowing through all of these smaller sentient ships and end up facing off directly with the mothership, in which you actually have to stop your ship, get out of the driver's seat, go to the back of the trunk, pull out your big old rifle, and blow that goddamn mothership to 100,000 pieces. No, you don't have to blow it to 100,000 pieces, but you do have to blow a big hole into it. This way, our boy Teshin can drop down from the ceiling and murder a sweet, wonderful sentient who's just sweeping the hallway to make sure the place is clean. Teshin, you did not have to be that darn cruel. And then that's when you play as Teshin himself. And I'll have to say that Teshin's probably the least different character to play as out of the three characters in terms of similarity to the normal Warframe gameplay. I mean, he plays a lot like a Warframe. He even has like this boost jump forward that feels, I don't know, a lot like a bullet jump. But he also has these elemental abilities for his sword, of which you have to appropriately engage the sentients with the right element on the sword, or you won't be able to damage them. So it's a good back and forth between the different elements and the different sentients that you actually come into contact with. And by using the right element, you can actually defeat them. He also has this other ability, which is like this throwing disc, of which once you throw the disc, you can actually follow the disc and it'll actually help you to fast travel across like long chasms and so on and so forth. It's actually pretty neat. I mean, there are Warframes that actually have that ability too, or something similar, but it's still pretty neat. And the nifty little disc can also be used to actually defeat enemies. So it also has that ability. Ain't that wonderful? Yeah. There's even this little doorway puzzle you have to do where you have to bust open a symbol at the doorway, and then you have to eventually make your way across the different areas in the room and break your way through the symbols that match the symbol at the doorway. It's pretty neat. It's fun. Most of the playthrough when it comes to Teshin, it mostly feels the same. I mean, it is inside of this mothership and it's different than the normal areas you go through in Warframe, but a lot of it feels very samey. I enjoyed my way through this, but because of the fact that Teshin feels a lot like a Warframe, it just, I don't know, it doesn't feel as different as Viso and as Call 175. As Teshin's making his way throughout the ship, Teshin actually starts getting some recollections of the first time you, as a Tenno, and him actually met up with the Queens. And he starts thinking about how he told you, you shouldn't have come here, you ruined us both, which is some good foreshadowing for what's about to happen later on. So it's actually pretty neat, but at the same time, kind of warned you of a few things. Also, while you're making your way throughout the ship, you'll also come upon some Grineer and some Corpus that are trapped in these red beam cage type things. It's pretty much other foreshadowing for other things later on in the game too, but it just, I don't know, it just looks kind of weird. As you're making your way through the ship or the outside of the ship, heck, I don't even know where the heck I am at this point. Ballas is talking a whole bunch of crap to you, and he's pretty much talking about, man, it's going to even happen to you and all that good stuff. Then something transforms in front of you, and it looks really, really weird, but you have to jump into the darn thing, and it teleports you somewhere. Well, ultimately somewhere where Ballas actually has the Lotus suffering as she watches and looks forward at Teshin lying on the floor, suffering too. Era is in the background, and from here, you and Era are actually going to duel with each other right in front of the Lotus. Now, mind you, at this time, you're looking in first-person view from the Lotus's point of view, and it's really neat, and the fact that you actually get a chance to go back and forth with Era in the background is really neat, but ultimately, this is just simply a torturing sequence, because ultimately, well, things don't end very well for Teshin. Era eventually strikes Teshin, bringing him down to his knees. Ultimately, his mind is being messed with the entire time and he's unable to focus. At this point, Era begins to suffer Teshin by eventually grabbing onto his helmet and breaking his neck, killing him. However, that's not before Era is brought to the ground by a void beam that comes seemingly out of nowhere, by your Tenno, who actually arrives just in time to stop Ballas and Era right in their tracks. In the distance, your Tenno can actually see Ballas standing right in front of the Lotus. Seeing the Lotus at this point, she clearly has been suffering as to the point that the life has practically been drained from her. She looks worn, her face and her entire armor is cracked, and clearly Ballas has been torturing her. Ballas smiles with this sick look and then actually goes down and forces a kiss on the Lotus like an overly misogynistic pig, sucking more life out of her, bringing her closer and closer to death. At this point, the void is beginning to be opened, slowly beginning to suck the Lotus right into the void. You run over to try to help the Lotus, and in trying to help her, you keep trying to pull her in, but you almost fail, exiting your Warframe, which I thought this was a really neat sequence. You exit your Warframe, holding on to her tight. In desperation, she tells you to let her go. Ballas, being the overly cruel-hearted knucklehead he is, actually cuts the Lotus's hand off, leaving her to fall completely into the void. And with you sitting there in complete disbelief, Ballas takes full advantage of you not paying attention and drives a sword right into your back. Mind you, Ballas is completely careless because, you know, you are a teenager and he just did this to a kid. Like, Ballas, you're a piece of crap. At this point, everything starts to glitch out, and then eventually you yourself, as a child Tenno, gets pulled right into the void too. Now, having defeated the Tenno, Ballas sits on the throne, looking pretty weird with a weird little golden leg. This guy, oh my god, this guy looks so weird and stuff like that, but he's celebrated for beating the Tenno with a weird looking smile on his face. Dude, it's not funny, all right? I mean, look at you. You used to look a little more remotely normal, okay? So just stop laughing. It's not funny. Far from it. Moving on. With Ballas's defeat of the Tenno, he has now taken over the Origin system. And with that comes his power and his control, which this kind of made me feel a little conflicted because I thought Era was supposed to be in control. I mean, the whole time I thought Era was the alpha, but now Ballas is the alpha. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but yup, now Ballas is in control of everything. And it appears that all hope is lost. However, with changing times comes a change in character. And right now on Earth, in the middle of a Grineer base, a new character emerges. Well, at least we believe he's new at this point. The character known, at least for the time being, as the Drifter. Yay! We'll find out a little bit more in a moment. Let's just keep going. All right, everybody. That is part 1 of my discussion of Warframe The New War. I will be back with part 2 so that I can actually just walk you through, all the things that I experienced in it and, just give you my opinion on the whole thing. But if you did like the video so far and you are prepared for part 2, please hit the like button. Please subscribe, hit the bell to be notified the next time I publish a video, and hit me up in the comment section and let me know what you think. Also, check out my other videos. I do create a variety of different gameplay videos, and that's because I do play a variety of different games. But as always, thank you very much for watching the video, and until next time, for part 2, people, this is Mong004, and I am out. Take care.